Welcome to Fraud on the Farm, a podcast where we examine real cases of fraud within the agricultural industry. I am your host, Joe.
And I am your co-host, Alex.
In each episode of this series, we will look at how these schemes were orchestrated, the red flags that were overlooked, and why these crimes matter so deeply for farmers and the ag industry.
Every case we cover features true stories drawn directly from court records and public reporting. These aren't just paperwork errors, they are often decade-long operations hiding in plain sight. We're starting this series because when fraud enters agriculture, the impact goes far beyond the initial headlines. As we'll see, when the system is exploited, everyone pays the price.
Let's get into the dirt.
Imagine you were trying to convince a major streaming network to give you like a reality television show all about your wildly successful, wealthy farming empire. But now imagine doing that while hiding a $70 million mountain of debt, and you're actively committing federal fraud while the camera crews are literally rolling.
It's wild. You're projecting this ultimate American dream to the viewers, while completely off camera, you're orchestrating a crime so massive it actually ends in a federal prison sentence.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking the criminal case against Steve McBee. And to do this, we are pulling from a big stack of sources. We've got a U.S. Department of Justice press release, local investigative reports from KCTV5 in Kansas City, and some incredibly detailed agricultural reporting from DTN, which is a major news syndicate for the farming industry.
Yeah, and our mission today is to look way beyond the cameras of that Peacock streaming series, the McBee Dynasty. We're going to break down the exact mechanics of a $4 million crop insurance fraud scheme. Because honestly, we want to understand the logistics of how this was even pulled off, how federal investigators finally unraveled it, and, well, explore the very real-world consequences for a man who basically traded his reality TV fame for a federal inmate number.
Right, because to understand the sheer hubris required for a 52-year-old patriarch of a family business to risk federal prison, I feel like we have to start with the immense financial pressure that was operating behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely. The context of the television show is crucial here.
Yeah.
So the McBee Dynasty, Real American Cowboys, is this series following Steve McBee and his four sons. That's Steve Jr., Cole, Jesse, and Braden. And they run McBee farming operations out in Gallatin, Missouri.
Yeah, and the narrative they sold to the network and to the public really was that this was a hyper-successful, cutthroat family business.
Right. The central drama was supposedly him deciding which of his four sons was going to take over this massive agricultural empire, all while they raced to secure a $100 million venture capital deal. It's basically pitched as Yellowstone, but in real life.
Yellowstone with real tractors.
Exactly. But the financial reality, which was confirmed in these federal court documents, was just crushing. This wasn't a family sitting on an empire of pure profit. Modern mega farming is incredibly capital intensive. You were talking about combines that cost $1 million each, thousands of acres of land, massive overhead. McBee farming operations was actually carrying somewhere between $50 million and $70 million in debt.
Wow. Okay, it sounds like trying to buy a sprawling mansion on a maxed out credit card while simultaneously applying for government food assistance.
That's a great way to put it.
You're projecting absolute wealth to the cameras, flying in helicopters, driving custom trucks, while secretly scrambling for a bailout just to keep the lights on and maintain the aesthetic.
The aesthetic is the perfect word for it, really. Yeah. Because reality television demands the aesthetic of extreme wealth. And for you listening, just think about how often the quote-unquote reality we see on television or, social media is entirely fabricated.
Right. We just assume they're rich.
We assume a baseline of financial success just because a production company is filming them. But while those cameras were rolling, capturing all that boardroom drama over who gets to be the boss, a multi-million-dollar federal crime was actively being committed just to afford the costumes and the set pieces of this supposed empire.
Okay, so with $70 million of debt threatening to crush the whole operation, McBee had to find cash. And he didn't do it by inventing some revolutionary new farming technique.
No, not at all.
He did it by exploiting a safety net meant for struggling farmers. So let's look at the actual mechanics of the fraud. Let's start with the 2018 crops event, because the sheer scale of the numbers the DOJ laid out is, well, it's just hard to wrap your head around.
The 2018 numbers are staggering. In that single year, McBee's farming operation actually produced and sold over 1.2 million bushels of corn and nearly 416,000 bushels of soybeans to a third party. Look, that is the physical reality of what the land yielded. But when he reported his production to his crop insurance provider, which is a private company called Rain and Hail, he submitted completely falsified documents. He claimed he only produced about 340,000 bushels of corn and just over 190,000 bushels of soybeans.
Wait, I need to pause on the logistics here, because we aren't talking about a few missing bags of seed. A standard 18-wheeler semi-truck holds roughly 1,000 bushels of corn, right? So by hiding around 860,000 extra bushels of corn from the government, he's essentially hiding over 800 fully loaded semi-trucks. Like, how do you just disappear 800 trucks worth of grain?
It's wild to think about.
Isn't a federal auditor like checking the silos before they write a massive check? Feels like grading your own test, but the teacher actually pays you for the failing grade.
It does sound completely absurd when you visualize 800 missing semi-trucks, but this really gets to the core of how our agricultural safety nets function in this country. You have to understand that the federal crop insurance program is largely a trust-based system.
Okay, trust-based.
Right. Companies like Rain and Hail issue the policies, but because farming is so incredibly vulnerable to systemic risks like massive droughts or, floods, the federal government, specifically the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation, or FCIC, actually reinsures those private policies. They subsidize the risk to keep the national food supply stable.
So it's essentially an honor system backed by taxpayer dollars.
Precisely. Sending a federal auditor to physically measure the grain bins and review the weigh tickets for every single farm across the American Midwest would be, it'd be logistically impossible.
It would paralyze the whole industry.
Exactly. The system relies on self-reporting. When you underreport your yield to that extreme degree, you are essentially telling the government, hey, my crops failed miserably, I suffered a catastrophic loss, trigger my payout.
It's like having an airbag in your car. It's heavily subsidized by society because we obviously want you to survive a crash. But McBee was intentionally driving his car into a wall at 5 miles per hour over and over again just to sell the deployed airbags on the black market.
That is a very accurate way to visualize the abuse of this mechanism, because unlike a complex offshore Ponzi scheme with, shell companies and wire transfers, this was a blunt force manipulation of basic production record.
Just changing the numbers on a form.
Yeah. And by lying about those numbers, McBee triggered over $2.6 million in unearned insurance benefits, plus another $550,000 or so in premium subsidies. He walked away with over $3.1 million in 2018 alone, literally just by lying on a form.
But wait, if he claims a terrible yield in 2018 that artificially lowers his farm's historical average, right? Like, he can't just run the exact same play the next year without the insurance company noticing his farm is just perpetually failing.
You hit the nail on the head. The paper trail basically demands a new strategy. And the DOJ sources note that the scheme evolved dramatically in 2019 and 2020. He wasn't just hiding bushels anymore. He started manipulating the history of the land itself.
The history of the land. Okay, so the sources describe this double cropping fraud in 2019. McBee planted soybeans and told his insurance company that these soybeans were the very first crop planted on those specific fields that year. Right. And according to federal policy, the government will only insure the first crop you plant. They won't cover you if you try to squeeze a second crop out of the same dirt late in the season because the actuarial risk of failure is just too high.
Yeah, the soil nutrients are depleted by then. The weather window is closing rapidly. From a purely statistical standpoint, you just can't ask taxpayers to insure a massive guaranteed risk like a late second crop.
But McBee had already harvested a whole crop of wheat from those exact same fields. He hid the wheat harvest, claimed the soybeans were crop number one, and pocketed federal benefits he had absolutely no right to claim when the soybeans inevitably struggled. But again, I am stuck on the physical reality of that.
The logistics again.
Yeah. If you harvest wheat, there is literal wheat stubble left in the dirt. If a local adjuster drives by to verify the soybean claim, how do they not instantly see a field full of wheat residue and know he's lying to them?
Well, it all comes down to reporting deadlines. In the crop insurance world, you file your acreage reports and your intended planting declarations early in the season. Often it's done electronically or at a county office. The adjusters aren't physically walking all 10,000 acres in the middle of planting season. They are inside processing mountains of paperwork. By the time a claim is actually filed months later, the field conditions have completely changed. the soil has been tilled, or the evidence is buried under the new crop. The fraud really exploits the gap between the electronic paperwork filed in an office and the physical reality out in the dirt.
Okay, that makes sense. This system just assumes a baseline of honesty on the initial paperwork. And then we get to 2020, where he shifts the strategy yet again. This time he went through a different insurer, NAU Country Insurance, and he planted a corn crop way past the final planting date allowed for insurance coverage.
Yeah, every specific region has a hard deadline for planting corn, which is dictated by agricultural scientists and actuaries. If you plant past that date, the crop won't mature before the autumn frost hit. The frost will kill it, yeah. No insurance company is going to underwrite a crop that is biologically guaranteed to freeze before harvest.
So knowing he planted past that frost window, he simply falsified the planting dates on the official documents.
Exactly.
He was shifting the financial risk of his own late planting entirely onto the American taxpayer, treating the federal government safety net as a personal cash infusion just to service that $70 million mountain of debt.
It is just a relentless exploitation of the rules. But you can only fake your planting dates and hide 800 semi-trucks worth of grain for so long before the paperwork finally catches up with you.
Right.
Eventually, the third-party grain elevators, where he actually sold the hidden corn, have their own reporting requirements. So eventually, the math just stops adding up.
And that brings us to the unraveling. Government investigators from the USDA's Office of Inspector General started connecting the dots. The discrepancy between what McBee sold to buyers and what he reported to his insurers was just too massive to ignore. The federal hammer finally drops.
It did. In November of 2024, Steve McBee formally pleaded guilty. He waived his right to a grand jury, stood before a U.S. district judge in Kansas City, and admitted to the entire scheme.
And the sentencing just came down in October 2025. And there was actually a bizarre media hiccup right as the sentence was handed down.
Oh yeah, this is strange.
The DTN reporting highlights that the court initially posted a judgment showing a 41-month prison sentence. But hours later, they had to issue an amended judgment setting the official sentence at 24 months in federal prison.
A nearly 2-year difference over a clerical posting error. I mean, talk about an emotional roller coaster for the defense.
Seriously.
Make no mistake, 24 months in federal prison is a severe reality check. He was ordered to surrender to authorities on December 1st, 2025, with a recommendation that he serve his time in Yankton, South Dakota.
But the prison time is only half the story, though. Yeah. Let's break down the financial room, because this goes back to dismantling that aesthetic of wealth we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the court ordered him to pay $4 million in direct restitution to the USDA's risk management agency. Now, restitution is meant to make the victim whole, or to pay back the exact economic loss caused by the fraud over those 3 years.
Okay.
But on top of that, he is required to forfeit over $3.1 million to the government.
And forfeiture is different from restitution.
Yes, forfeiture is the government actively stripping you of your ill-gotten gains. It's the state saying, you don't get to keep the toys you bought with stolen money. And meanwhile, as private creditors were circling, the sources show that McBee and his family farms defaulted on a $1.3 million loan with Rabo AgriFinance, which resulted in a judgment of default in court.
The walls were just completely closing in. And the detail on that asset forfeiture is fascinating to me. To satisfy that $3.1 million forfeiture judgment, the U.S. attorneys filed a bill of particulars targeting his personal property. The government actually seized 3 of his luxury watches. We are talking about a Rolex Daytona, a Tag Heuer Formula One, and a Tag Heuer Grand Carrera. DTN estimated these watches could be valued anywhere from $23,000 to over $1 million, depending on the specific models and material. Yeah, but seizing a Rolex sounds like something from a Miami cartel bust, not a Missouri crop insurance case. Why go after the jewelry?
Because legally, the federal government is required to claw back any property that is derived from proceeds traceable to the fraud. So if they can prove you bought a luxury watch or a custom truck using the money you stole from the taxpayer-funded crop insurance program, well, that asset is now federal property.
Wow.
When a reality star owes millions in restitution and forfeitures, federal agents will absolutely liquidate those luxury items. They are physically dismantling the illusion of wealth that the fraud paid for. The Rolex isn't just a watch anymore. It's the costume of the real American cowboy, literally being repossessed by the state.
That's incredible. But okay, before we wrap up, we have to talk about the wildest legal maneuver during the sentencing phase, because McBee's attorneys tried to keep him out of federal prison using a $150 traffic ticket from 2019.
Oh, this is a brilliant window into how federal sentencing actually works behind closed doors. It is not just a judge picking a number of months out of thin air. The federal system uses a literal mathematical grid, the federal sentencing guidelines. Break down this grid for us.
Because how does a traffic ticket factor into a multi-million-dollar fraud sentence?
Okay, picture a chart. The y-axis, going up and down, measures the severity of your current crime. Stealing $4 million puts you pretty high up on that axis.
Makes sense.
The x-axis, going left to right, measures your criminal history in points. The more past crimes you have, the more points you get, moving you further to the right on the grid. Where those two axes meet dictates the mandatory range of months you serve in prison.
Okay, so every point matters because it pushes you into a harsher column.
Exactly. Now, under recent criminal justice reforms, there is a special provision for what they call a 0-point offender. If you are in the very first column on the left, meaning you have absolutely 0 criminal history points, a judge is granted special leniency.
Oh, wow.
They can lower a sentence significantly, sometimes dropping it below the recommended guidelines entirely, which could mean walking away with just supervised release instead of actual prison time.
So they were fighting over his column on the grid?
Yes. According to the pre-sentencing documents, the government wanted to assign McBee one single criminal history point. That 1 point was tied to a $150 traffic infraction from 2019 for the consumption of alcohol while driving. Literally just an open container ticket.
So his defense team was arguing that if they could get the court to throw out that 1 point for a traffic ticket, he would slide back into the 0-point column and potentially avoid a cell in South Dakota entirely.
Exactly.
You're trying to leverage a technicality on a 6-year-old open container ticket to erase a 24-month sentence for a $4 million federal fraud.
It was a massive gamble. But the court saw the strategy and overruled McBee's objection. That single point stuck, which locked him out of the 0-point offender leniency and sealed his fate for the 24-month sentence. It just shows you the desperate, calculated legal maneuvering happening right up until the gavel falls.
Let's step back and look at the full picture of this deep dive. We started with a man aggressively projecting the image of an untouchable, wealthy agricultural titan on network television. We peeled back the curtain to find a farming operation drowning in up to $70 million of debt. We watched as that immense financial pressure turned into a calculated multi-year scheme to defraud the federal crop insurance program. He hid hundreds of semi-trucks worth of grain, lied about planting dates to shift his own risks onto the taxpayer, and literally faked the agricultural history of his own land.
Right.
And we ended with a judge handing down a 24-month federal prison sentence, demanding $4 million in restitution, and federal agents repossessing the Rolex right off his wrist.
It is a profound and, frankly, incredibly public fall from grace. But if we connect this back to why this matters to you, the listener, it comes down to the integrity of the hidden systems that keep society functioning.
Yeah.
Agricultural safety nets are not victimless, endless pots of money. They are funded by your tax dollars, and they're designed to protect the nation's food supply from genuine disasters.
Right, because when someone exploits that system just to prop up a failing business model or maintain a wealthy aesthetic for a streaming audience, it undermines the trust that the entire honor system is built upon.
It hurts the honest producers, the farmers who actually experience devastating, uncontrollable losses, the ones whose crops are wiped out by a freak freeze or a 100-year flood. They need that safety net to survive. Fraud at this scale threatens the viability of the insurance pool for everyone else.
Which brings up a final lingering thought for you to mull over. According to the DTN reporting, even after the guilty plea, even after the $4 million in restitution, and the reality that the patriarch of his family is heading to federal prison in South Dakota, other news outlets are reporting that the McBee Dynasty is still set to air for a 3rd season on Peacock.
It almost defies belief that the show goes on.
It really does. If audiences know the entire financial empire they're watching was propped up by stolen federal tax dollars, will they still tune in? Will viewers still watch the illusion of the real American cowboy, knowing the helicopters in the boardrooms were funded by a multi-million-dollar fraud? What does our modern obsession with reality television say about us when the reality we are eagerly consuming is actually a federal crime? When a glossy high-stakes camera lens finally shatters and the truth is laid bare in a federal courtroom, are we still going to be sitting on the couch waiting to see what happens next?
Thanks for listening to Fraud on the Farm. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves a good story. And if there's a case you'd like us to cover, let us know in the comments. Until next time, remember, some of the best dirt isn't found on the field.